Welcome to the WRW podcast, where we discuss and explore the world of women's writing. I'm Abhi.
I'm Sammi. I'm Anand.
And I'm Davy.
Today's episode is about Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag.
Yay!
Yay.
But before we get into that, we have an important question from Davy.
What is the funniest lie you guys have ever said in your life?
I don't know. I don't consider myself to be a very good liar or a very effective liar. I have not lied very often. I have laid down. That is in fact the position in which I sleep. But I don't think I've told any funny lies. Does anyone else have a funny lie that I can? I think Devi is the liar's friend.
Yeah.
So she has the funniest lies.
I'm not much of a liar. What
Yeah.
can I say?
I'm also not much of a liar, so I don't think there's any humorous lies that I've told. Devi.
You guys are so boring. Wait 1 minute while I type my funniest lie out.
You think that's how they did?
No, as in if you had to typewrite a thing specifically.
We're going off track,
typewrite
but
it.
we will be back with Devi's funniest lie, which she's still
See
typing,
you
by the way.
next week on WRW podcast.
Today's sponsor is... What's this website? Some robotic website that does text-to-speech. Speaking about getting off track, does anybody watch Formula 1?
Okay,
No.
Devi is ready.
Okay, Devi's done with her funniest lie.
I was 8, I think. And I really wanted glasses. I kept telling my mom I had eye problems and she took me to the doctor. And I lied about all the letters on that site test thingy. But the doctor only recommended medical sunglasses. Very sad and bad.
Devi, that's amazing.
It used to me that you were once 8.
I too thought that having glasses would be so cool, and I'd like, wow, I want to get glasses.
My assumption of Devi being the brat kid was right.
Too fun.
She's making violent gestures because we mentioned too fun. Before we get into the actual episode, I'm sure you guys might be wondering what's going on today. So we will be getting a very well-needed PSA from Sammi.
Yay! Devi is very sick and throat hurty today and will not be speaking. We have instead employed a text-to-speech interface robot to replace her.
And we are just funnier now, so...
Yes. This has been a PSA.
Phoebe Mary Waller-Bridge is an English actress and screenwriter who is quite famous for being the creator and star of the BBC sitcom Fleabag, which is based on her one-woman show of the same name that she performed in 2013. Fleabag is a comedy drama series which spans across 2 seasons to show us the life of our main character, who is a confused young woman addressed as Fleabag, living in London, that is trying to navigate through life while badly coping with a recent tragedy. The show is quite an exploration that presents to us how people cope with their issues in their own ways and really brings us to terms with how flawed human beings are, as we see Fleabag coping with loss in her own ways, which is mostly humor and deflection, and who I personally think is one of the most relatable characters to come out of a dark comic series. So my first question to you guys is, how did you guys find out about Fleabag? Anna?
So I found out about Fleabag through Tumblr, and there's like a lot of these parallel posts that you see which have quotes from there. I think I always knew about Fleabag. I had this like really long phase where I just knew about some TV shows, but I just never watched them. Fleabag was one of those, and I think I watched it last year. In the beginning, I watched one episode and then I was like, oh, this isn't for me. It's not. I just decided it wasn't for me. But then I watched it again for some reason, once again because of Tumblr and a lot of these like Instagram accounts that I follow, which I cannot describe them. Yeah, so basically, thank you, Tumblr. Devi?
I watched it for the episode. Because Anna told us to. That's it.
Okay, so I knew about Fleabag for a very long time, but there's this friend of mine on Twitter who kept talking about Fleabag, and I was like, maybe I should just watch it, like give in to the urges and like watch it. So I decided to watch it, and then I got really, really depressed watching it for like the first 4 episodes, and then I was like, oh my god, this is not for me. I can't keep watching this because I felt really sad watching it because it was too realistic for me, and I was like, oh my god, what the hell? I can't do this. And so I just left it. But then after this, we had to do an episode on Fleabag because me and Anna, mostly Anna, was like, oh, Fleabag. So I had to watch it again, and then it was fine for some reason. Yeah, okay, Sammy.
I agree in that having to produce work or do some writing or a podcast on a show or piece is a significant motivation, because while I watched this show once again because we were making a podcast on it, and y'all were like, oh my god, Fleabag. And even though like Abhi had not watched the whole thing, it seemed like you had this idea of what kind of work this was going to be and how influential it was, and I had literally never heard of it in my entire life. And
Sorry, Phoebe.
despite being someone who is chronically on Tumblr somehow, it had completely escaped me.
Different circles.
Yeah, different Tumblr circles. And so I too, while I was watching it, I started feeling like I didn't get it whatsoever. There's a specific genre of comedy, dark comedy show. What comes to mind is End of the Effing World and stuff like that. But it's just like bad things happen and over again, and then the characters are just unfeeling. And I have not actually watched that entire show. I watched the first 5 minutes. And there's like so many other shows that I've just watched the first 5 minutes and it felt like that. And Fleabag also felt like that. But I continued watching and I had some very interesting things to say. And so I'm excited for this discussion.
Yay. So I've noticed that in the show overall, there are more male characters that are unnamed than female characters. And that's something that irked my curiosity. And I was like, oh, what's this? So my question to you guys is, what do you think about Fleabag's relationship with women in comparison to her relationship with men? Sami?
Yeah, so the characters not having names thing, it was very interesting to me, but like that was one of the things that I liked about the show. I think it can be hard to keep track of names. The only name I remember is Claire, which is her sister. Are there any other? And Boo, her best friend.
Martin. Claire's husband.
Oh yeah, that guy that guy who I erased from my memory. But yeah, there's a minority of characters actually are referred to by their names. Even I don't know if Fleabag is her actual name or if that's like a nickname.
It's not. No one calls her that. Like no one addresses her.
No one addresses her. I have a feeling like someone addressed her as Fleabag, her sister. No,
never.
Nobody has ever called out to her by name.
Wow. Yeah, so I found that very interesting. But one specific part is like the characters that don't have names and the way that they are referred to. There is going to be a lot of cussing in this episode because that's the name of the people.
Yeah.
But like she has sexual relationships with a bunch of people, and these men are known as like the guy that fucked me up the ass and something else and
Bus rodent.
Bus rodent, yeah, and just very derogatory kind of descriptions.
Redundant. They're very redundant to just like her sexual endeavors in the show.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
Just, yeah.
And I think that that reduction is very surprising, but it also makes you think about like how many times women are called, okay, like, oh, the one with the big tits or something like that in a lot of other contexts where they're reduced to their bodies. It's not necessarily a good thing to call anyone, a good way to refer to anyone, but it points out this aspect of ways in which we talk about people and their bodies.
There's also Harry,
Harry?
Yeah.
her boyfriend.
Man, I forgot all of these men.
He's like on and off with her for a very
Yeah,
long
yeah.
time.
No, I remember the character. I don't remember his name. Devi?
Guess who's back? I was sick of using this text-to-speech verse, which called me, like, I had to spell my name as Daevi because it wasn't getting Devi. But I won't be talking much because my throat hurty, as Sami said. I will be contributing very little. Do not miss me. But text-to-speech will be there only for some parts. You'll have the real thing. None of you look happy. Everyone hates me in this house. But okay. You miss the text-to-speech. You want...
value to this episode.
Yeah, it was our
Am I nothing without my comedic value? Do my opinions and thoughts and their expression? Okay. I'm just gonna go ahead. And I'll add on to what you said, Sami. That subversion thing, because it's usually like, you know, that guy's locker room chat, which refers to like women as, oh, she's tits, right? She's the one with the nice tits, and like she had a tight. Okay, no, I'm not getting explicit here, but
We don't have locker room culture here in India, but there are like chat rooms where women are spoken about in these ways that break out and get big scandals.
But I don't think that in Fleabag she uses it in like a derogatory way. I think she just like does not remember their names. So that's why
Which is also kind of bad though. Okay, this is a bigger question.
Yeah.
Devi, back to you.
yeah. You're right, Abhi, about her just not like giving a shit about like them. But this thing is usually associated with men, right? Women are the ones usually like portrayed as more emotional, more attached to the relationship. And in this case, it was actually like her boyfriend Harry who like Sami forgot, because he has this thing where he wants to like give her a surprise, and he makes dinner for her, I think, while her surprise for him was like barging into the bathroom while he was taking a bath in like this with a knife, wearing like this thief burglar type of outfit. And it was kind of insane. But I did like this subversion of, you know, kind of like gender roles in the way her relationships work out. And her entire thing with Boo, I'm not even gonna like, I don't know what to say about it. Just know that I watched the first season. I finished it day before yesterday. I finished my dinner after that. I wasn't feeling anything. I went to the bathroom. I was sitting on the toilet, and then I just started bawling my eyes out. Oh my God. I just started crying, thinking of the entire... I don't even know what to say. Her and Boo means so much to me. Yeah, I like that men aren't that important in this show, except in the second season, which we will be getting into. But yeah, I love you, Boo. And my throat is giving up, so I'm just gonna give the mic to who wants to go. Abhi? Yes, Abhi?
I just want to add one thing to what Davy. I just want to add one thing to what Davy said about her. It's just, I was thinking how hypersexual she is in the show, and how she uses sex as like an advantage to her, because she uses it to get out of every situation or to get into situations that she wants to get into. And that's something I've noticed. But besides that, this show is very central to like female friendships and relationships, because mostly the focus that I felt of this show was around like Claire, because that whole sister bond between them is like so real, you know, like that's how me and my sister are, but like less, like, you know, less intensified, because they stand up for each other, they're there for each other, but they're also just at each other's throat like constantly. And I feel like her relationship with Claire and her relationship with Boo and her relationship with her mother, which she's not very open about, all of those are really defining to this show. Okay, Sami wants to say something.
Yeah, I think you can, on a very surface level, just look at the names that characters get. But like I was saying, I did not enjoy this first season. I did not get the humor or comedy that was supposed to be there for a very long time. So I was taking notes. And then I wrote down in our shared document that at some point this becomes terrifying, which is the kind of deadpan reactions kind of swirls beyond a thing of comedy, and you're just like, wow, this looks like it would be very terrifying and traumatic. And then in between this, you get shots of Fleabag and Boo having a very fun time, having some kind of conversation that's so warm, and the lighting is also much warmer. Or you'll have a scene between Fleabag and Claire, her sister, and those shots where you have this strong relationship between women characters are much slower, and they kind of draw you in this very inviting way, and then they're suddenly gone because you're pulled back to that terrifying scene. And I think there is a very, now I'm finally using the word stark correctly, there's a very stark difference between the way that each relationship is shown, and it's very beautiful. Abhi?
I just want to add a silly little detail that I found on Reddit. Somebody mentioned that Boo was named Boo because she's so repressed in Fleabag's memory that there are flashbacks of her, and she's so traumatized by it, so she's like a ghost. So it's like Boo,
She's also dead.
Yeah, she's also dead. So that's just one thing that I read.
A little ghosty, like Boo.
Boo, yeah.
It reminds me of Sami. Except I don't want her to
Yeah.
and traumatize me and make me.
Oh my god, you're my Fleabag! Oh my god!
Yay.
Okay, Anna.
Yeah, Anna.
Thank you. Okay, so what I want to say, I think, goes back a long way into this discussion when you guys were talking. It's sort of that I think Fleabag has a lot of more control over her relationships with men than she does with women. Because you see the way that she acts with fuck me up the arse and bus rodent and also Harry, where she has so much control over that relationship, and a lot of times you see her just giving these reactions to them, and then she looks us in the eye and she's she's so aware of the fact that she's in control, that she is in some way she can adapt to the expectations that they have of her and be whoever they want her to be, even though she realizes that she's aware of the fact that she is faking a lot of the things that she's doing around them. But I do feel like she's much more candid with the women around her. You have to see those interactions that she has with Claire, especially, to just look at how she seems like she's more present in that moment. I think she makes less eye contact with the camera when she's with all the women in the show. And yesterday I was watching this again because I didn't want to forget stuff. But there's this one scene when they've gone to that silent retreat, and the instructor person over there, she says, I want you to think of a time when you were really comfortable and calm, and she thinks back to being with Boo. And it's also I also noticed what Sami said about the lighting changing, and you see how warm the cafe looks when Boo is around versus when she's not around, when it just looks dark, even though it is empty.
It's a lot less saturated. It's a lot more whites and blacks.
I think this control thing that Fleabag has in the relationships that she has with the men around her, you have that continuing on until the last episode, where she's assuming something. She's thinking about these men in a certain way. She's predicting what they'll do, and they go entirely off script. And then you see the panic that she feels in that. When Fuck Me Up the Arse comes and tells her that I realized that I'm in love with my ex-girlfriend, and you made me realize that I'm in love with her. When she's expecting
a confession,
And with Harry, when it's always like, oh, he's Harry, he's gonna come back. He's spineless. He's going to come back.
Just like,
anyway.
oh, don't show up at my door in underwear again. It won't work. And then she's like, oh, it will work. But then
It doesn't. Because he's with, like, he doesn't even leave that dinosaur, and she basically comes in front of him and she makes a fool out of herself after, she says all of that, and he's just like, I'm with someone now. I think that's a very defining moment for me in the show, because it's just that awareness of a lot of things coming over her, that you have a character who's very self-aware, and she's constantly showing it to you, that she's saying, oh, look, I know what I'm doing. I know what these people are doing. I know what I'm doing to these people. And then you just have a scene where she's completely out of control, which is something that I think you see more with her relationships with women, in the way that they're so
intense.
Yeah, and it's like she doesn't have control over that, because the men in her life, often they just come and go. They're just there for her. Like, she gets something out of them, they get something out of her, and then it's just like she doesn't name them. They're not really that important in her life.
It's like a plot device.
Yeah, sort of.
She lets in the men through the door, but the women, they can use the window,
And they're always just there inside.
We're everywhere.
It just doesn't feel very performative when she's with the women in the show, rather than when she's with men. It's like always looking at the camera and like breaking the fourth wall, and then giving us like some remarks about the situation. But with women, it's just like she's so focused on the conversation and the environment that she's in. Yeah, so it's like very central. As shown in a scene in the first season, Claire, who we mentioned is Fleabag's sister, and Fleabag, they're seen calling themselves bad feminists because of their willingness to trade 5 years of their life to have an ideal body. So what would you categorize as a bad feminist and a good feminist? And is there really a definitive set of rules which puts you under either of these categories? Devi?
Oh, if I really answer this, it's going to be a long one. So I'm just going to again, for the sake of my really sad throat, who is crying out to me right now internally, I'm just gonna put out this one point. I think I told this to Sami. Fleabag technically is a manic pixie dream girl, if you think about it, but written in the perspective of a woman. Okay, if Fleabag was a side character and this show was from the perspective of some guy who was who wanted his life to be changed, Fleabag would come in with her, humor and her cigarettes and her...
1 second, can Anna please explain what is a manic pixie dream girl?
That's not what I wanted to do.
I want you to do that, because please explain. Explain what is a manic pixie dream girl.
Okay, so in a very loose term, it's this sort of woman who's very whimsical and very, I want to say whimsical and inviting, who actually does have a very whimsical and inviting nature. And she's very bright, and she's very funny, and she's just...
Basically, her main purpose in the narrative is just to change the outlook of the guy and change his life. Examples would be that girl from Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I keep forgetting her name, but if you guys have watched the movie, the girl he falls in love with, who has that ex he fights with, yeah, she is a manic pixie dream girl. Yeah, so Fleabag is a manic pixie dream girl, but written by a woman, and has a lot more depth to her. And I feel she's not a perfect person. And also that entire feminist thing, I don't think that pieces of media have to be looked at always from a feminist perspective. Fleabag, at the end of the day, maybe the subversion of gender roles and stuff, that was all great, but I loved Fleabag because of its exploration of grief, rather than it making, I don't know, I did not see Fleabag as her gender, if that makes sense. It was just someone going through grief and dealing with it in a very harmful way. But I still loved her despite the things she did. And Anna?
I think what you just ended with by saying that, you like her despite a lot of the shitty things that she does. I think that's something that's very important for me in Fleabag, is that she's a really candid character. I think being a woman in like a world it sounds very vague, but you are aware a lot of times, especially if you're in the context that she is, like you are an urban dwelling, pretty privileged person. You are aware of like a lot of these political constructs of like patriarchy and sexism and being sexualized. And I think I really like how Fleabag is very self-aware, that she knows that these are things that are happening around her, but a lot of times she does play into it, which I think is really, yeah, she's a very interesting character in that. I was watching in my rewatch yesterday, there's this scene where she's walking on the road, and she's saying that, oh, this is, just that sort of a day where you feel hot, and then like you're wearing a cute top and your hair looks pretty and your skin is great and stuff, and she's walking, and then she sees another man walking towards her, and she's just like, yeah, look at me, I'm really hot. He's probably like totally staring at me. I think like in a context, you would just be like, oh, that's so vain of her, why is she giving in to the patriarchy? But the thing is that she knows that that's the sort of world she lives in. But sometimes I think even I find myself just, sometimes you just feel like, oh wow, see, I look hot in the eyes of this random man. I am someone who is desirable according to the male gaze, and that just makes you feel good about yourself sometimes. Yeah. I really like that about her.
Just one small thing. That thing you just said, it reminds me of that Margaret Atwood quote, the one, like, even when you think you're not, you're going against the male gaze and dressing up for yourself, there's a woman within yourself, like you become your own voyeur. Yeah, I love Margaret Atwood. Anyway, Abhi.
Okay, so what Anna said about patriarchy and women being sexualized, I feel like the feminism in this show is so like tainted with the whole male gaze thing, because like the whole ideal body thing that they were talking about in that conference, Claire and Fleabag, it's like inherently it's just because of the media that they've seen growing up, and then it's because of the male gaze, or like this, like men prefer the woman who's like this or who's like this, like a particular type of woman. So I feel like even though their feminism is so, I don't know if it's good feminism or bad feminism, but it's just they're like playing into it, they're using it to their advantage, because we see Claire, she's so stuck up and she's so like, I don't know, uptight about everything, and then because there's this expectation that the society might have of her to like be perfect in every way, and then Fleabag is just the opposite, because she, like I said, she's such a hypersexual character, because she knows that women in the society are super sexualized and like men view them as objects most of the time. So she's using that to her advantage to get what she wants in life. And I don't know if that counts as bad feminism or anything, but yeah, that's what I think. Sammi?
Yeah, so there, in a certain way, Fleabag is this rude, terrible, thoughtless, and horny woman that is, I mean, none of those are positive aspects for any person. I mean, horny is a neutral aspect within a limit, but none of those are socially desirable things to be described as man or woman. But it's a representation of womanhood that I personally have not seen a lot of. It's not something that's new to me, because this show was released in 2016, and since then there have been a lot of rude, terrible, thoughtless, and horny women characters that I have consumed and then not enjoyed very much. So I was watching Fleabag and I was like, I guess she was the first, and that's what makes her good. And I was reading into articles online, and there's a whole bunch of these. I will link some of them. One is, the Fleabag era of dissociative feminism must end, and the smartest women I know are all disassociating. And so, talking about how Fleabag's character kind of embodies this ignorance and kind of self-removal from the badness and terribleness of living in a patriarchal society. Like, she does nothing about it, about anything terrible that happens to her. She says nothing about it. She's just, I won't say a victim, but she's just a receiver and a passive participant, in terms of she's not changing anything or doing anything new. She's just sleeping with men and utilizing her feminine body to seduce more men and ruining her female relationships. And in that sense, I can tell why people are angry with the representation of femininity that Fleabag encompasses. They're angry because Fleabag doesn't try to go against all of the patriarchal stuff happening to her. But I think a lot of women, this might end up controversial as I say it, but there are a lot of women that don't try, that aren't always fighting. And there are a lot of women that are rude and terrible and thoughtless and horny, and they are treated terribly by society. Sometimes like, for example, if Fleabag is thinking in her head like, oh, I look so nice, and then this man who is like some piece of garbage is going to catcall me while I'm walking on the street, and obviously it's like prejudiced of her to like think he is going to catcall her, but then he says walk of shame as he passes by her and shames her, which confirms that he's a piece of garbage. But also, she didn't actually do anything to him. She was just thinking this terrible thought in her head. And I think we do have a lot of intrusive thoughts that we don't work on. I think everyone is a little bit terrible inside, and for better or worse, has that little, not even a devil voice, but just a voice that's a Fleabag voice, yeah. That's just like always saying the worst possible shit in your head. And there's this, a lot of women don't feel they're even allowed to do that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of men feel like they're allowed to even express that little voice. And I think Fleabag, it shows this difference where Fleabag is only ever as terrible as the people are terrible to her. And a lot of that is performatively and just in her head. So I think that this is a good representation of feminism, but I am open to other people saying no. And I'm sure there's a lot of evidence for that. Anna, your hand is shaking. Yes, please speak.
Okay, so the first time I watched Fleabag, I did not register this. I mean, now it kind of seems obvious to me. But you know that one episode where they go to the silent retreat, and across their silent retreat, which is for women, and that their dad pays for as like some sort of daughter's day gift or something like that. Mother's Day gift. Yeah. So that's something that their dad does, that for daughter's day, mother's day, whatever. And for birthdays, he does things like
gives them vouchers for
therapy, and then to go to like these talks that are given by feminist talks. Yeah. And then this silent retreat, which is, supposed to like just help them become better. Yeah. And across that place where they're supposed to go for that silent retreat and become better women, there's this one retreat going on for men, for them to become better men. And you see the contrast of how for women it's just like, oh, you have to become good, you have to be calm, you should be silent, and you should like, take things in your stride and be like
clean the place.
Yeah, and address things inside your head. While for the men, it's just like they're straight up shouting,
letting all of it out.
Yeah,
on blow up dolls of women.
Yeah.
Just like a weird convention going on across.
Yeah, and it's sort of a very interesting allegory for what society is like. Yeah. And I think I really like that about Fleabag, that it like stuff is just happening, but you draw inferences from it, because isn't that what society is actually like? Like I might know some theories about like feminism and what sort of what waves of feminism are there, what wave we're currently on, what is a good feminist ideal, but you really look at things only when you're in that situation, right? I mean, honestly, I don't think I'm doing anything great for women in the world or like helping us become more powerful or anything. But I think in a way, the fact that you're aware of something that's going on around you, and in some way you engage with it in whatever form, is I think it is good enough feminism.
In the show, Fleabag is seen breaking the fourth wall almost constantly to provide the audience with witty little jokes, side remarks about a situation she's in, or simply her inner monologue. Since Fleabag is the only character that seems to be aware of the audience being present, it gives the idea that we are closer to her because of the continued acknowledgement. How did this constant breaking of the fourth wall change your viewing experience? Okay, Devi?
As usual, I'm going to provide my surface level commentary for this episode because I cannot think, I cannot speak, I am just... Anyways. I feel like that I knew before starting Fleabag, there was this like breaking the fourth wall thing, but I did not expect it to be so frequent. Like it was literally just her talking to us for the majority of the show. And to me, we are doing dramatic monologues in class, and I just kept thinking, man, this is like her just like talking to the audience, like a dramatic monologue. And there's this emergence of I wouldn't call it a meta narrative, but more like a meta fiction, because, you know, it's her looking at us, talking to us. But at the same time, I'm not really sure if she's talking to the audience or, okay, here's the thing. There's a lot of scenes where I feel like, it felt uncomfortable to me personally because literally one of the first scenes is a sex scene where like the guy who fucks her in the ass, like he does that and she looks at us and like narrates the entire thing and her thoughts on it, and like it's humorous, but it's also like, what am I watching right now? It's very invasive. It made me feel like a voyeur. At the same time, again, I told this to Sammi yesterday because I keep telling her things and she's like, girl, save it for the podcast. But like, I don't do that. The only scenes I noticed in season 1 where she does not look at the audience once are in the flashbacks with Boo. And it made me think, what if this is her way to cope? Maybe that's her internal dialogue with Boo and not with us in the end. And I don't know. I'm just very invested in Boo and Fleabag. And yeah, I hope the audience is Boo and not really us. Because that makes the sex scenes really uncomfortable to me. I didn't want to know all that Fleabag. Anna?
Yeah, along the lines of what you're saying, I was reading this article and I was like watching interviews with Phoebe Waller-Bridge last night at 11 p.m. which is very late for me. The interviewer in that, they were basically asking Phoebe Waller-Bridge what she thinks of, like, who is Fleabag addressing in the show. And she said that she really likes how people are interpreting who it's addressed to, like how you said it's you'd want it to be addressed to Boo. For me personally, I felt like she was talking to me, but at the same time I felt like she's talking to herself, and I am an entity who is part of her consciousness, and she's just like aiming stuff at me. And that's one question that I've had, like, in this whole thing. As you said, dramatic monologue, right? So we are that silent listener who's there, and we're just like always listening in on things. Devi?
No, wait, Anna, I get what you just said, because remember I texted you like a few months ago that I just like, I was in the shower and I imagined that like my old school friends were there and I gave them an entire lecture on like Chinese linguistics based on this like one YouTube video I had watched. And like, it's a very natural thing to do. That's also a really funny interpretation of like how Boo goes about her day-to-day life, because I keep thinking that people are watching me, not in an insane way, but in a way to cope, because I like attention and I just like keep talking to
TMI.
Yeah. Sammi?
I just like the ambiguity of it, because like she never really tells us who she's addressing, so you can like interpret it in so many different ways that you can see her from different perspectives.
I have no statistical evidence for this, but I think we all do the thing where we like pretend there's people from our lives and we're like speaking for them.
Just talking to yourself.
People like hearing my thoughts the entire time.
No, just like talking to yourself.
I have this running game where whenever I'm in public, I'm like, who is the mind reader? Are you the mind reader? Do you know that I'm thinking about you being the mind reader? I did this so much during our first sem, like the end sem exams. I did this. I'm like, are you the mind reader?
We are not insane, guys.
No, I think everyone does this a little bit. But I think it was strange to me how Fleabag was doing this while there were other definitely more important things going on. Like some sort of I don't remember if this is season 1 or season 2, some sort of very important family dinner where you're supposed to be. That happened in both seasons, right? And then everyone is fighting, and then she is turning to us in commentary, very witty, snarky thing of what's going to happen next. And I think the point that Devi brought up about dramatic monologue. So we've been studying this in English literature. It was pioneered by this guy named Robert Browning, and basically it's like a poem where there is this silent, not a poem, it's just any piece of writing where one character is saying something and the whole writing is their dialogue, and then there is this implied audience, fictional audience that is supposed to be receiving the dialogue. That is not us, that is not the reader, right? I can see how this Fleabag reminds me of a dramatic monologue, but I don't think it feels like one. I feel like it's the inverse of that, where there is a silent audience, or an ignored audience rather, because they are also having conversation that we can hear. But it's strange that Fleabag is addressing the audience of us rather than addressing this clearly present audience, right? It's strange that she as a character has awareness, and it gives you this sense of she's ignoring a lot of the things that are happening around her, and it makes you wonder as to why. Abhi?
Personally, I really enjoy her like breaking the fourth wall so often, because otherwise I don't think I would have been able to watch this show in like continuity, because it's so serious. And like I really like the fact that she breaks the awkward moments and like such tense conversations that she has with people around her to give us some insight on what's going on inside her head. It makes me feel closer to her, and I also feel like, oh wow, it's so serious, but at least she's coping in whatever disastrous way.
She's silly.
At least she's silly and funny, and like she has a coping mechanism. She has a way to deal with that situation, and I don't have to constantly worry about this woman.
Yeah, I think a big part of comedy is surprising you in a way that like not necessarily in a terrible way, but in a somewhat inviting way. And the situations that she's in are so stressful, and so in that context, her giving the snarky commentary is kind of it's lighthearted. I won't say it's warm. I won't say it's comforting, but it's lighthearted and it's unexpected. And I think that's one of the main aspects, if any, that qualify Fleabag as a good dark comedy show.
I also think that a lot of Fleabag constantly addressing us, you see that a lot of people in her life, they don't pick her a lot. Like they don't, I think the last person who really chose her over other people was Boo. And now she's just living in this world where it's just like, you know, sometimes you feel tethered to people, and if you're the sort of person who feels tethered to one person and you lose that tether, then you're just like, what am I doing here? Why am I existing? And this is something that Phoebe Waller-Bridge said about like the audience or whoever Fleabag is addressing. So she was like, she's constantly grappling with this need for the audience to validate her, because it's about the pressure of being watched and feeling like if you're not being witnessed, does what you're doing count for anything? Does it matter? And there's this like other quote, I mean, I will make a parallel post on this, I swear.
Okay, Tumblr user, please.
And it's one from this poem called What Use Is Knowing Anything If No One Is Around, by this poet called Kaveh Akbar. And yeah, that's what he says. What use is knowing anything if no one is around to watch you know it? I think that's a lot of what Fleabag does, that she wants to show you that she's aware of everything that's going on. Like, even when she's in a situation like she's having sex with someone, but she'll like look at you in the end and be like, look at this guy. I think that one scene where she's sitting with fucked me up the arse
Guy.
yeah, that guy. And they're sitting in the bathroom, they're sitting in the bathtub, and he's like asking her very, deep questions like, have you ever felt lonely? What are you most afraid of? And then she knows that she's giving him the answer that she wants. Like, he says, what are you afraid of? And then she's like, losing the currency of youth. And she knows that that's the sort of answer he's looking for, and that's why she says it. And you have her just being that self-aware that it is a performance, and the only time that she loses that edge that she has of her control and of the control that she has over what she's performing is in the last episode when Claire says that, like, what you did to Boo, you're the reason she sort of died because you went and cheated. You were the reason, like, her boyfriend cheated on her. And that's when she looks the camera in the eye, and suddenly she's not in control. She's very scared, and it's just like we are finding out everything through Fleabag, and this is a moment where we find something out, and it's out of her control that we find out about it. Devi?
Oh, I don't know if I'm remembering this right, but like you said, it's that loss of control. I feel like something about us viewing her becomes much more invasive from that point on till she reveals what actually happened with Boo. I don't know, I felt like we were almost like cornering her.
Yeah.
The
camera does pan around sometimes
along.
like that.
It just zooms in. Yeah.
There's good news and bad news. This episode was part 1. We'll be back with Fleabag Friday part 2 for our next episode to discuss the second season. Yay. The bad news is that will be in 3 weeks' time because we have midsems. So fun. An unrelated bonus piece of good news is that the release date is Anna's birthday! 25th of March. Don't miss it. Don't forget to follow us at wrw.podcast on Instagram and at wrw_podcast on Twitter. You can write to us at womenarewomen22@gmail.com. The links to all things discussed will be in the description, and I will also post about them on Twitter. Thanks for listening. Bye!
BY.
Real.
Cute.